Good afternoon. Welcome to the 2021 Johnson County Charter Commission meeting. It is a little after 4 o'clock on Monday, November 8th. Thank everybody for coming. The first item we have on the agenda is roll call and determination of a quorum. Deputy Clerk Sater, would you please call the roll?
Wendy Bangezer. Thank you. Mike Boehm. Thank you. Karen Brownlee. Karen Brownlee. Absent. Vicki Charlesworth. Vicki Charlesworth, are you on Zoom?
Vicki Charlesworth, present.
Thank you. Jim Denny. Thank you. Jane Dirks. Thank you. Jimmy Gaona. Thank you. Tedrick Hausch. Thank you. Randy Hutchins. Thank you. Chris Iliff.
Here.
Thank you. Laura Klingensmith. I was told she's on the way. I'll let you know when she comes in. Joy Costin. Thank you. Brent McCune.
Brent McCune, present.
Eric Michelson. Thank you. Ed Peterson. Thank you. Don Rattan. Thank you. Leslie Riverola.
Leslie Riverola is present.
Thank you. Don Roberts.
Don Roberts present.
Thank you. Kyle Russell. Thank you. Paula Swak. Thank you. Brenda Sharp. Thank you. Greg Shelton. Thank you. Greg Smith. Thank you. Zach Thomas.
Present.
Thank you. And Chair Musel.
Chair is here. "23 out of the 20, here's Commissioner Brownlee. So 24 out of 25 members are present. We do have a quorum. And so we'll move on to the first action item on the agenda, which is approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting, which is essentially to begin the first reading of proposed amendments. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda? If not, I'll take a motion to approve. Moved by Mr. Peterson, seconded by Mr. Russell. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries without opposition. The second item is to consider the approval of the October 27th, 2021 minutes. Those minutes were of our second public hearing, and effectively that was the only thing, the only item of business that evening. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes from the October 27th meeting? Moved by Mayor Boehm to approve. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Hausch. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of approving the October 27th, 2021 minutes as published, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. We have no old business. Our new business today is this? Okay. Today's agenda is intended to begin the first reading of the 15 proposed amendments. As those on the commission know, we received 15 proposed amendments. Some of them overlap or are contradictory, but are same subject matter. We received 3 recommendations, one of which has been withdrawn, so we have 2 recommendations. to consider. We'll consider the recommendations after we determine the action on the amendments. Some of the amendments may be something that we simply cannot accomplish under Kansas law. And so if the sponsor of those wants to have those considered as a recommendation, we will consider them as a recommendation. The process that we established in our rules, adopted back in June, I believe, is that we would have a first reading where a proponent of an amendment or a recommendation could make a pitch, a persuasive argument for their proposal. We could have some short discussion among the commission, and then we would have a motion and a second on that and see if it receives 9 votes. If it receives 9 votes out of the 25 members, it would then proceed to a second reading where we would discuss it in further detail with more debate and discussion. That's the process that we're going to go through today. My anticipation is that we'll get through as many amendments as we can today. Don't know if we'll get through all 15 or not. We'll get through as many as we can. At our next meeting, which is scheduled for November 17th, we will get through the rest of the 15 that we didn't get through on first reading and begin second reading of any amendments that did in fact achieve 9 votes in the first reading. And Laura is here now. So we have 24 out of 25, or is that 25 out of 25? 25 out of 25. Thank you. Continued diligence by this group. We sent out, I think on Friday, kind of a grouping in an order that the executive committee had looked at for the amendments, and we intend to proceed in that manner. I do apologize that we didn't number the amendments so we could refer to them by number, but we didn't. The first grouping is about elected positions. It's how it's titled. And the first one is to change the positions of county clerk, register of deeds, and county treasurer to elected positions. Our process for the record is going to be that Deputy Clerk Sater will read the submission as it was submitted by the Charter Commission member, including by name of the Charter Commission member and the proposed change. And then the proponent will have the opportunity to present their amendment. So if you could start with the first one, Linda, that would be great.
Change the positions of county clerk, register of deeds, and county treasurer to elected positions from their current status as appointed positions. The submitter is Wendy Bangezer.
Wendy, you have the floor. We're trying to limit this to 20 minutes total. So we'll try to figure out how to allocate it and look at what's fair. But again, this is a first reading. And if it gets 9 votes, we'll go on to a more detailed discussion. So Wendy, the floor, Ms. Sharp. Well, because they have been submitted, we did not identify everybody when we posted it on the website, but once it becomes a public meeting and a presentation, it's our opinion that we need to identify those commissioners, and we will have roll call votes on each of the, whether it's on the 9 votes or the 13 votes. Okay. Good question. Okay, Wendy.
Chairman, may I-
Sorry, we can't hear you. Those of us on Zoom can't hear a thing.
Okay, just.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Johnson County is the exception right now. This amendment would help Johnson County, countywide elected officials be more consistent with other counties in the state of Kansas. Electing these officials would make these offices and Johnson County government as a whole more accountable to the deeds of its citizens. I received emails and messages from several Johnson County residents asking for this amendment to be proposed in some form. There's concerns about authority in county government being too concentrated with just a few. Thank you for this consideration of this amendment.
Thank you, Wendy. I don't intend for this to be those that are for it go first and those that are against it, because I think there may be questions or comments on it. Does anybody have any questions at this point? I might, for the benefit of the public, in 2000, when the charter was adopted, those three positions, county treasurer, county clerk, and register of deeds, were changed from elected positions to appointed positions appointed by the county manager. So this would go back to the status before the 2020 charter. I'm sorry, the 2000 charter. Any other comments or questions? Ms. Rattan?
I just have a question about skill requirements for these positions. Can you talk a little bit about that? The skills required to succeed and do our citizens right?
You want to repeat that for the Zoom?
A question about the skill requirements for these positions. Can you talk a little bit about what skills are required for these people? And how do we ensure that they are up to par in what we need as citizens to fulfill the duties if they are elected?
I could be wrong, but I think we already have a statute in there that says what the requirements should be. That wouldn't change. It'd just be elected or appointed.
If you do have a question, we will bring a microphone to you so that everybody on Zoom, both members of the commission and members of the public, will be able to hear your question or your comment. Ms. Sharp,
Can we
it's coming there.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know if these.
Oh.
You can use that one as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Can we verify the statement about the statutory inclusion or reference to skills or experience or expertise?
We'll ask Ms. Dunham
Legal here.
to look at that while we're discussing it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I also meant to start at the meeting with a comment that Cynthia Dunham is with the county's legal office. She has been advising us or instructing us, giving us guidance as we go along through this process, both on open meetings and Open Records Act issues and other items. She has looked at some of these issues where there may be a conflict between the proposal and state law. And so I just wanted to be clear that she is not technically our attorney. She is providing us guidance from her position on the county legal staff. So Cindy, if you can let me know when you have an idea on that. So that's asking for the statutory basis qualifications for these positions.
And if the charter members that are on Zoom could please raise your hand so that you can ask your questions directly in the meeting. We do not want those on chat. Those need to come directly in the meeting. So please raise your hand and we'll call on you. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on Wendy's proposal? There are some on Zoom coming, and then we'll go ahead, Ms. Costin. Then we'll
Yes,
get to Zoom.
I'd just like.
That should be a microphone, right?
Yes.
I'd just like to get a little background on why this was changed in the last charter commission. Can you rebrief us on that a little bit? Was there a rationale?
I can't. I have not reviewed the minutes of those meetings to determine why it was changed. I don't know if there's anybody else here that believes they have. Mr. Peterson?
To Commissioner Keston's question, my recollection of the statements of both the sitting commissioners and former Chair Annabeth Serbaugh was that there had been a vast improvement in the professionalism of those offices, and that was the intent of the changes, to move those from political positions to professional positions, and that the changes that have occurred since then had achieved that objective.
Okay, from Zoom?
Zach Thomas.
What kind of language do we have in there in the odd situation that nobody runs for a position?
There. I suspect it was the same, it will be the same way as before. Probably a good point, Zach, to point out that if we move something forward on several of these, there are going to have to be more detailed descriptions, changes, legal language to determine how it would actually be implemented. So I think it's fair at this point to say some of these are conceptual. And if we move to second reading, they would have to become more detailed before they could ever be really voted on, and certainly before they could be placed on the ballot. As with any position now, Zach, I'm guessing that if nobody runs for it, it is unfilled. I don't know that that's ever happened in one of the countywide positions, but I know it has in some township positions.
Chris Iliff.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a time to comment on the merits of it or not. Zach, to answer your question, probably somebody who got 10 write-in votes would end up with the position regardless of their qualifications. I just wanted to say that in my opinion, these are bureaucratic positions. They should not be subject to voting. Nobody is going to know who the county clerk, the county register of deeds, or the county treasurer is. And I think it's best that they be handled by professionals who are appointed according to a rational system run by the county commissioner and county manager and endorsed by the county commission. I think the system we've got is working great. I'd hate to see it changed.
And because Iliff is too hard to spell, you'll never get a write-in position, will you, Cliff?
Right, yeah, because you'll call me Cliff instead of Chris.
Chris.
Yeah, to your point exactly.
I think we have another Zoom and then we'll go to, Kendrick.
Yes, for Commissioner Costin's question, I looked at the Charter Commission report from 2000. At page 12, it says the Charter Commission, following interviews with each of the elected officials, determined that the positions of county clerk, register of deeds, and treasurer were ministerial in nature and did, and I think it's a typo, it meant to say did not, involve formulation of public policy. Discussion focused upon the need for coordination of information systems as related to recording, appraising, and taxing of property. Based on recommendations from consultants on local government operations, the Charter Commission concluded that consolidation of these positions under the county manager could result in greater efficiency and service delivery.
Thank you. Other comments? Ms. Brownlee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As to the question on qualifications, typically that's the purpose of a campaign for whoever may run for an office. And we have people here at our table who recently won. Congratulations. And that was most likely part of your campaign, was to express what qualified you to pursue that position. And I think that would be the way it is for each of these positions, is those people who are pursuing it would put forth why they believe they're qualified.
Ms. Rattan?
Is there any insight on what's not working with any of these three positions? What's broken?
Well, I think the biggest part of it is there's no accountability to the citizens of Johnson County. That's what we heard over and over in emails that we all received, that there was no accountability to the citizens.
Can I ask real quick on the Zoom, can you see the name of the person that's speaking? Anybody that's on Zoom?
No, I cannot.
Okay. Okay, let's state our name and then when we start speaking, so we have a clear record of that. Okay, I saw Ms. Costin, I think.
Yeah, I just want to address, I think, Commissioner Singer said that, now I forgot what you said, that the
Accountability.
The accountability to the people, but I'm not sure that the normal citizen is going to be fully aware of the day-to-day interactions and performance of a county employee or someone who's working in the county. And yes, once every 4 years, they might get reelected or overtaken or whatever. But I think in terms of my county treasurer and my register of deeds and county clerk, I want to make sure that they are accountable to a system within the county government so that we have checks and balances every day, not just once every 4 years.
Somebody on Zoom.
Vicki Charlesworth.
Yeah, Vicki Charlesworth. I have been retired from city government for almost 3 years now. But as a former city clerk, I can tell you that I worked with all three of these departments, and they were all very professional and very well run. So I do think that the system, the way it is right now, is working very well.
Mr. Russell.
I don't know if Ms. Dunham has come up with the statutory answer yet, but I can tell you, I'm looking at the charter report from 2000 as well. And unless it's changed since then, or unless they're wrong, they said they reviewed the duties and operations of the 5 elected officials. No specific statute. Those offices. I don't know if that's still true or not.
Thank you. Cindy Dunham.
Is it on now?
Yeah.
Cindy Dunham from the legal department. I think that's correct. And also what Commissioner Brownlee stated earlier is an accurate description that the statutes regarding the 3 offices do not get into any professional type qualifications.
All right, if there are no, Mr. Boehm, Mayor Boehm?
Mike Boehm. I have a procedural question here. Q&A, opinions, and then vote?
Correct.
Are we going to, do we need to support or defend or what's your preference? Or do we want to have 25 opinions before we vote or just go to votes? Or
I'm going to assume we're all active advocates for good county government and that we will speak up if we have something on a particular issue. And then when there are no more people to speak or questions to be asked, we'll move to a vote.
Okay, thank you. Then I will state an opinion at this point. I've worked for almost 30 years in municipal government. We have similar roles in the cities across the county, all of which are appointed by our city managers, city administrators, very similar to what we're doing with the clerk now. I don't think it's broken. I think you'll hear me say this over and over and over, maybe 15 times tonight. I think things are working well as they are. There's no reason to change. Walt, I agree with, can I call you Senator or Commissioner Brownlee down there, that elections are to educate people coming off the recent election. I assure you, facts are always suspect. I can say anything I want in a campaign, whether I have qualifications or not, and people aren't paying attention. I think we put ourselves at risk of having folks that can get one more vote or have a well-financed, good campaign, but not have any skills to run the offices compared to the appointment. And ultimately, they report to a county manager who reports to a commissioner who we elect. I'm fine with that structure.
Randy Hutchins, I don't think it's fair that we categorize our citizens as uninformed and don't have the ability to make good decisions when it comes to elections. I don't think that's appropriate. I think we've got some very smart and astute citizens, and I absolutely think they ought to have the right to vote. And so that's one of our given rights in our democracy, and I think we ought to give them the opportunity to do that.
Thank you. Laura, Ms. Klingesmith.
Thank you. Laura Klinging-Smith. One of the things that we heard over and over from both in our public comment section as well as our written is that our citizens are tired of an appointed form of government. And I don't think that the 25 of us really have the full say-so, that we had more people that are for an elected form of government versus an appointed. And I think that these people should have the right, like they did 20 years ago or 21 years ago, to elect these people. And to say that we can only hire good people for these positions versus elected, Does that mean that why is anyone elected then if we can only hire good people? I think that we need to let the citizens of Johnson County make their own decisions of who's going to govern them.
If there's nobody else, I think it makes sense for us. Oh, Mayor Boehm.
I did not intend to insult the electorate. I know that folks are busy and don't have time. Or the sources of information are not readily available that you can trust anymore in our media society. I also want to point out and remind everyone, we represent 600,000 people. 700 or 1,000 that came to a meeting and had voiced an opinion may not represent the majority. It represents the majority of those who attended.
I think for purposes of the first reading, we'll ask for a motion from the presenter. And if you get a second, then we will move on to a roll call vote. A yes vote would move this to second reading, where we would have some more discussion and debate on it. A no vote means that it would not proceed, or you do not believe it's appropriate to proceed to a second reading. Are there any questions about the process? If not, Wendy, would you make your motion?
I want a motion to vote on proposed amendment to change the positions of county clerk, register of deeds, and county elected positions from their status as appointed position.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Greg Smith. I don't think we need any more discussion, but I'll open it for discussion if there's any final comment. If not, we'll have a roll call vote.
Wendy Bingesser.
Wendy Bengesser, yes.
Mike Boehm. Karen Brownlee.
Karen Brownlee, yes.
I will state we had Bingesser, yes. Boehm, no. Brownlee, yes. Vicky Charlesworth.
Vicky Charlesworth, no.
That was a no. Jim Denning.
Jim Denning votes yes.
That was a yes. Jane Dirks.
Jane Dirks, yes.
That was a yes. Jimmy Gaona.
Jimmy Gaona, no.
That was a no. Tedrick Housh.
Tedrick Housh, no.
That was a no. Randy Hutchins.
Randy Hutchins, yes.
That was a yes. Chris Iliff.
No.
That was no. Laura Clinging Smith.
Laura Clinging Smith, yes.
That was yes. Joy Costin.
Joy Poston, no.
That was no. Brent McCune.
Brent McCune is a no.
That was no. Eric Michelson.
Eric Michelson, no.
That was no. Ed Peterson.
Ed Peterson, no.
That was no. Don Rattan.
Don Rattan, no.
That was no. Leslie Riveriola.
Leslie Riverola, no.
That was no. Don Roberts.
Don Roberts, no.
That was no. Kyle Russell.
Kyle Russell, no.
That was no. Paula Swak. That was no. Brenda Sharp. That was no. Greg Shelton.
Greg Shelton, no.
That was no. Greg Smith.
Greg Smith is yes.
That's a yes. Zach Thomas.
Zach Thomas, no.
That's no. Greg Musel.
The chair would have voted yes to move it to the second reading. I think that's 8 votes if I count right.
That's correct. It is 8 yes. And 17 no.
The second item is by Randy Hutchins. Would you read the next amendment, Ms. Sater?
Establishment of Johnson County unincorporated trustee position elected by the unincorporated citizens of Johnson County.
And before, I think, Randy, we talk about this, turn it over to you. There are questions. On some of these, it's a pretty clear legal question. For instance, this as a foreshadowing, when we get to the county appraiser, that is a state statute that the appraiser is appointed. So we cannot change that. We could recommend to the county commission to go to the legislature for a change. That one seems pretty black and white. There are a number of these that are in the gray area. This is probably one about whether we can create a new position, whether you can create it, where it has fewer people represented for that position than other county commission districts, things like that. On those things where it's gray, my intention is to go ahead and discuss it and see if there's interest in it, and then we can get a more definitive legal opinion. So if that procedure makes sense, then we'll go ahead and Randy, go ahead and present your proposed amendment. Well, they're getting ready for that. I'm going to go ahead and address the third position there, which I did a minute ago. The third proposed amendment, also by Randy, was to change the head of the Johnson County Appraisal Office to an elected position. My understanding is that in the 1970s, the legislature changed all appraisers to appointed positions, and that is a statutory requirement that we could not change. So at some point, we'll ask Randy if he wants to put that on as a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners that we could consider later. But I don't intend to have us discuss that at this point. I don't think it's anything productive as a proposed amendment. See it all. I'll tell you when to air now. Okay. I'll stand.
Okay, we should be good.
Very good. All right. First of all, I'd like to thank you guys for the opportunity to present this. This presentation, quite honestly, has been 2 years in the making. I farm in rural Johnson County and some surrounding counties, and apologize for the attire, but I just climbed out of the combine and come in here to present to you all. What I'm prepared to present here is nothing out of the unusual. This is actually a position that's elected in many states. This position is also known as the county engineer. So the county engineer is actually elected in some of the states. You can research that. So I just first wanted to preface that. If we look at what I'm really asking for, it's a position that would be elected by the unincorporated citizens for a position that not only would take care of public works, but also the planning and development. If we can go to the next slide, please.
so sorry. For those of us on Zoom, if we're supposed to be seeing something, there is nothing on our screens.
Yeah, we're trying to fix that.
Leslie, we're working on that right now. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Are you seeing it now?
Yes, thank you.
So just to kind of give you some high-level stats about the unincorporated area, today in Johnson County represents about 40% of land mass. However, it only represents about 10% of the population, of which only 2 of the 7 county commissioners have unincorporated constituents in their area. So you can see right out of the get-go that we're far-fetched to really have a serious voice within our county government. And beyond that, if you look at the different levels of government that's established in the United States, each level was to ensure that each area had a representation and a significant voice for their area. So you certainly wouldn't want the president making decisions in local Johnson County. That's why we have different levels of government, of which that go down through all the way to the local level. Should also be known that we do in fact have townships that have been established. At one point in time, the townships actually had control of the local government. It wasn't at the county level. It was at that point that it was determined that there were some economies of scale, and therefore the county started providing that. However, as the county started transforming, exactly what I mentioned, we now have 40% of land mass, and yet only 10% of the citizens that are in those areas. So if we can go to the next section. So what do we have happening here as a consequence of that? What we were seeing, and I think you heard Brian Pedig talk, there's virtually no capital investment that's been made in the unincorporated area. What we've seen is most, if not all, of the CARS dollars being shifted into the city limits. And so we're one of the wealthiest counties in the nation, and your unincorporated citizens are driving on dirt roads. You have 2 pictures here that it's hard to tell, and that's the whole point of it, of school buses traversing down our dirt roads, of which the kids are getting ready to get on that bus, and they're going to get covered with dust. So if we can go to the next item. So this is an illustrated picture of 2 different type of land maintenances. One to the right is a farmer maintained road because they take pride in their land. The one to the left is county maintained. You can clearly see the difference. Let's move on to the next slide, please. This is from one of our applicators that we've got traversing the roads as well. As you can see, we got limbs that are hanging down. I recently had a $10,000 GPS globe on my John Deere applicator that was crushed by a limb. So it's significant. That's an example. There's many parts that are broke as we go down the roads with our farm equipment. To the right there in the upper right corner, it just gives you an illustration of the applicator. That's the front view of the applicator. That applicator is 16 foot wide. All right, our roads are 18. Sometimes if we're lucky, they're 20 foot. So if you can imagine trying to get down those roads with an applicator with an oncoming car, it prevents a safety condition, certainly for us as well as the other oncoming traffic is concerned. If we can go to the next. So this here, so imagine that applicator coming to an oncoming car. What is your option? Especially on a hill, all right? If you go in that ditch, you could roll over and get killed, all right? The other thing is if you don't take the ditch, all right, and the person on the opposite side coming at you, it's not going to have a happy ending. So a lot of times you got vehicles that are trying to back up. So the point of the matter is as we've evolved in our agriculture and our equipment, we haven't kept up with the roads at that same pace. And so it's created some hazardous conditions. So if we can go to the next item. This necessarily isn't the scope of the county, but if you could see, there's actually a power line that's hanging over the roads. So we wanted to make sure we have good partnerships with the electrical companies as well to ensure we got safe conditions. That particular line there was hooked by a combine and nearly yanked down the pole and presented a very hazardous condition. So if we can go to the next slide. This is in Edgerton, Kansas. So as you all know, there was an intermodal that was put in place. There's some things that took place when they put in that intermodal. Number one, they closed roads, right? So farmers no longer have the ability to go down 4 corners to get to their farmland. So what did that leave us? Well, we had to go west to 199th, or we had to go east in the city of Gardner. So about a year later, all of a sudden, this concrete berm come in place on 199th. Well, now what are you going to do? Clearly, that applicator on the right isn't going to fit. Your tractors aren't going to fit. Your combines aren't going to fit. So what do you do? So if we can go to the next slide. This isn't a great picture, and I apologize for that, but you can see point A and point B. Point A is where I just took the picture. Point B is one of my fields that's just a 1/4 mile down the road. So now let me explain to you what I now have to do with my farm equipment. My options are either go south to Edgerton Road and go clear down into Miami County. So for those here, I'd actually have to come back into Edgerton, come all the way down to Hillsdale Lake, come over across 231st, go all the way back up, then come back on 199th. My only other option is I got to take 56 all the way up into Gardner and take my equipment through the city of Gardner. That presents some very dangerous conditions. If I could also state, if you look here, one thing that we've been fighting with is essentially you got to go 5-6 miles to go a 1/4 mile, right? The question I've got is why hasn't there been a capital investment that simply connects 207th from the west side of Edgerton just over to the east side? And I will tell you, it requires a bridge. It requires a capital investment. Time and time again, we take our capital dollars and we seem to put them elsewhere. We need some investment in the county, and we've been lacking it for some time. If we can go to the next picture. So the other thing is a lack of representation. So where are we at today? As you know, those decisions that you put in the concrete dividers, those are often made within the cities, or they're actually made in the county commission. In the instant that we had where they put the concrete divider in, we all thought it was the city of Edgerton. Well, Mr. Roberts would tell you it actually wasn't their decision. It turned out, you guys remember the Parks and Recs Commission? Well, it just so happens the Parks and Recs has a wedding venue that's just 300 miles to the east of that facility. In order to keep the trains from blowing the horns during the wedding, BNSF said, well, if you put this in this concrete divider, our trains won't have to blow the horn. We're not against weddings, and we're not against not having, that. The question becomes is, why wasn't the unincorporated area incorporated and asked an opinion on what we could do? All we had to do is expand that 20 feet more. We've got time and time again instances where, and within the cities, we can't get our farm equipment through. So we're in this area to where essentially we don't have a voice. We don't get to sit on the city councils, yet we get city people put on the commissions that impact directly the citizens of the unincorporated area. And that would be in the form of the Planning Development Commission. And someone's got to scratch their head, well, how could that possibly be? I can't imagine Don Roberts, getting a phone call from the newly elected mayor in Gardner saying, Don, love the fact that you're growing the city of Edgerton, but fact of the matter is we got more people within the city of Gardner. So now we're going to assign 3 of our city councils to your city council. Well, that just wouldn't happen, right? The same thing could happen in the Chamber of Commerce. It could happen, in other mayors. It could happen from Mayor Lucas, right, of Kansas City, Missouri. Hey, be the good corporate citizen. Let us take over some more area, right? So that seems silly, but that's essentially what's happening right now in the unincorporated area. So if we can go to the next slide. So in the end of the day, what we're looking for is a form of government that truly gives the people in the unincorporated area a voice. I want to be clear that we don't believe there's a people issue. The people within the public works, the people in the planning development, organization are doing just as they were directed, right? There's some good people in those organizations. Some of them worked on our farms. So we've got a good relationship. It isn't about, the individuals. It's just about making sure we have a government structure that gives us the voice. So I thought about it. Is it a county engineer that we need, like a lot of other states have elected? But I don't want to put confinements as Ms. Rattan mentioned. Do we need somebody with a certified engineering degree to manage the city, the unincorporated operations? I don't believe that's necessary. In fact, it may be limiting because often people with engineering degrees don't think more socially and more broad as some of the other folks may. So that's where I didn't want to limit it. I want the best person for the job. I want a good sound leader for that position. The other thing
Randy,
is
we're about 13 minutes, so I think this is probably your last slide because this is your.
It is. And trying to make sure we have a well thought out plan. I had an opportunity to reach out to the district attorney's office. They said they would serve as a third party in helping with the transition. Make sure it was fair and balanced in terms of the employee base, making sure they had plenty of support, as well as the finances, would move over with it. There's a significant investment that needs to be made. It was estimated we got about 125 miles of roads that are still unpaved. We believe that's one of the first things we need to do is make them safe, get them chip and sealed. The other thing, as I mentioned, we got bridges that need to be improved. We need to invest in the, and also we need to make sure that we're investing around the intermodal to make sure it's safe as well. So if we can go to the next item. So what I ask of you is, put yourself in the unincorporated shoes, right? Give us a voice. Give us a vote. Put it to the people. Again, our biggest challenge is, will we get enough votes? Because will enough people care about the unincorporated area? That's where we find ourselves. And that's the reason why I believe you should support this, is because there's not enough skin in the game. If we got skin in the game, then we would be able to move things forward. So I want to thank you very much for giving me the time and an opportunity to serve on this Charter Commission.
Thank you, Randy. Questions for Randy about his proposal? Yes, Laura.
Okay, first of all, I want to go on record and state that I do live in of Johnson County. I live in Aubrey Township. Question, this is really just more for a conversation. Currently, there are 7 townships in the unincorporated area. Each have 3 elected officers, a trustee, treasurer, and a clerk. So that leaves us at 21 elected officials, plus your 2 charter members. That's 23 elected officials for the unincorporated part of Johnson County for the 10% population. So would you suggest that we eliminate the townships? Or what's your suggestion? Because we currently have 21 elected officials right now.
And that's
And
a really
some of
good.
and the other question I would throw out there too, just to make sure, some of these townships up to Aubrey Bend, we're responsible for the sirens, the crossing guards. So there are things that we are responsible for. So it wouldn't just be the roads, it would be other items that would have to then roll up to either this position or another county office to take up.
I think it's a great question. And And I had to get educated myself on the townships. As I mentioned before, the townships usually actually manage the public works and the planning development within their individual townships. In fact, that's the way it happens in Ohio. They still are very active. They have their own planning development, their zoning boards within the townships. I wasn't able to get a clear history in how this all transpired. I talked to several past leaders, and as you can imagine, they're in up in age, and they frankly don't know how it happened. They said that they used to take care of it, and something transpired at the county level. There was no vote, but it just went to the public works at the county level. Laura, I don't know that I have the answer for your question, right? I don't know if it needs to be consolidated.
I don't
know
either,
if it needs to be more invigorated. I know McCammons Township, I talked to the current trustee and they said they do nothing more than maintain the cemetery. So.
And Aubrey Township may be a little bit different because we also maintain the cemetery. So I think that we would need to probably understand what each township is responsible for so that we would know whether we need to incorporate all of them in this one office, dissolve it. So I completely agree with you on the chip roads, the rock chip. I mean, they are horrendous. We do need better roads out there. I completely agree with you. For those of you that don't live in unincorporated Johnson County, when it's harvest day, the text message goes out, we stay off the roads. We let the tractors have the right of way. So that is part of our life. So I would like to see if we can actually make a motion to learn about what is being responsible for each township or what we need to do in order to create this new office. Is there a way we could do that?
As I mentioned earlier, this is a gray area as to whether we could even create a new elected position. And if so, what that position could be and who it would represent. But I think conceptually, Randy has put on the table a new elected position that would be elected by the unincorporated area to represent the unincorporated area. And the scope of that authority is something that we would have to dig into a lot deeper if there are 9 votes to move this forward.
Okay.
Ms. Sharp and then Ms. Costin.
Thank you, Randy, for that presentation. I grew up in an area where people farm hectares and I've worked harvest many times. So I appreciate the situation with equipment on the roads. I'm a little confused about what the actual proposed amendment we would be voting on is, because you did mention an unincorporated trustee. You talked a little bit about a county engineer, but it sounds like you're saying this was your preferred alternative to a county engineer position. Is that, am I correct about that?
That's correct.
And then you talked about a transformation office. So do you see that as part and parcel of this? Are we voting on a transformation? I just want to be clear what we're voting on, if it's this unincorporated trustee position or if it's also how you get there. So maybe to Greg's point, there's a lot of details to work out still.
Yeah, and quite frankly, not being familiar with this process, what I wanted to try to do is put together as complete a package as I could. And so questions that I got asked as we were going through this, well, how would you fund it? All right, so I tried to answer that question. What would the roles and responsibilities be? So I tried to spell that out. And so I did my best that I could to try to answer those questions. But quite frankly, I think it's going to take the smart people in this room to really help figure out. I think we got to identify the problem like I did, and then figure out how's the best way to solve it.
Thank you.
Ms. Costin and then Mayor Michelson and then Ms. Brownlee.
Thank you, Chair Musil. Thank you for this presentation. I think it's really important that we understand what the unincorporated communities are struggling with. I'm curious why two things. Why the title of unincorporated trustee? And is that an additional commissioner that sits with the 7 current commissioners? And then my other question is why do why are there only 2 commissioners that have anything to do with the unincorporated? Why are there not, why is it not spread out between all of the commissioners so representing everyone in the county?
I think that's an excellent question. And honestly, I give it a lot of thought. And, one side of me said, well, we need a dedicated person that sits on the commission, right? But if we did that, that means we got 1 vote, right? So instead of 2, then I thought, well, maybe we farm out, everybody gets a piece of it. And then you start looking at the reality. And I frankly had a former commissioner tell me, he goes, Randy, I love the unincorporated area, but the fact of the matter is I win or lose the election based on the people that are in these cities. And what do you do with that, right? So I don't have the answer to that. I guess my thought was we actually had a subcommittee that was formed to try to get the unpaved roads chipped and sealed. And we spent hours on that. I even went to Vance Brothers, myself and another commissioner went to Vance Brothers, one of the largest chip and seals. They just happened to be in Kansas City area. And what we were told by the county was it would take $1 million a mile to chip and seal the roads. And I'm like, what the hell? So we went to Vance Brothers. Not only did they say no, but they also slid a server document that they actually give it to the county. And it was $40-some thousand a mile to chip and seal the roads. All right. So that was very frustrating. And so the point becomes, why? Do you just throw a big number at it to make the problem go away? And then I thought, well, by exposing this and understanding it's 50,000, 60,000, with today's cost, I thought that would generate some ambition within the county commission. Say, hey, we got a problem, let's address it. Not a single red cent, not a single red cent of capital dollars put out there. There was no plan. I wanted a 5-year plan. Hey, I don't want you to spend all the money in year 1, but at least have a plan. There was no plan. And so that's what led me to believe is, listen, we got to change the game. This is the best idea I had in order to get some traction to get this done.
Follow up, and then we'll go to Karen Brownlee.
Thank you. So just one follow-up. So as Laura suggested, all of these unincorporated units have their own form of government, so to speak. So they have elected officials. Do they not have a budget of some sort? Do they not have any taxing authority of their own that they can, or get a portion of county taxes? I mean, is there just nothing available to remedy the problem?
I can only speak for McCamish Township. I know there was a cemetery that was abandoned and has since been reclaimed by one of our local board, and Terry Atwell is our elected trustee at this point in time. What she had to do to get funding to rehab that cemetery was she actually had to put something on the ballot that actually approved just to maintain it. I mean, there was tons of donations from local farmers, businesses, et cetera, that helped with the expense of reclaiming it. But that's the extent of the financing that we're aware of, and perhaps Laura can give us shed some light on her township.
Aubrey Township does have the ability to set a mill levy to cover their expenses, but they're a little bit different in the fact that they have to maintain the sirens, the crossing guards. They actually have some administrative costs that they have to maintain for the county. Other county townships such as Oxford, they don't have any financial obligations to the county that they need to fulfill. So it actually, I believe it's probably more on a township by township basis. And that would be something that we would need to learn and discuss. But while I have the microphone, one of the things besides a township is what would be the thoughts of the planning committee, the zoning committee that we have that's combined between like Stillwell and Spring Hill. I don't know about Lexington or Gardner or Latha townships, but we do have the zoning committees that would need to be taken into consideration with this new office. So I just want to throw that out there as well.
My understanding is there are 3 planning commissions for the unincorporated parts of the county, a northwest, south, and southeast. I think so. Those are made up of majority of folks from the unincorporated area that they represent, right?
Yeah, so
that's for the planning commission.
So make sure we understand how it works. So there's a planning development commission that is established. And part of our challenge is we have now have people from the city that are sitting on there. And quite frankly, they're flipping the script on us, right? So as we have issues such as solar farms that are coming up, all right, obviously as a landowner, you've been paying for that land for all this time, and now you have an opportunity to family up to where you can maintain that farm, within the family. And now we have folks from the city like, well, if you do that, it may prohibit us from expanding the cities. Well, where did that come from, right? And so I think we all want to be good, good citizens and everything. And I think we'd like to partner, but it doesn't seem quite right that someone from the city on the commission will dictate to what a local farmer can and can't do with their land. So that's part of the challenge that we've got. So we got a planning development commission, and we set the recommended rules and regulations. Then you have, as the chairman was stating, you got 3 zoning boards, one for McCamish, and then one in Lower's region, and I think there's one other one and then when you want to make changes within that area, it goes before the zoning boards. However, all of it goes to the county commissioners for approval. So many times what we want to do from a zoning board perspective, we send up to the county commissioners, they send it back and say, try again. So that's an issue.
I'm sorry, Karen, Mayor Michelson was ahead of you, and then Karen Brownlee.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner Hutchins, for raising this. It's been very educational, and I think that's in the spirit of what this commission is all about, to bring forward problems and propose solutions. So appreciate that. I'm convinced that there's an issue here. Sounds like maybe primarily a public works issue. I have a lot more questions. I'm sure others do too, about the overlap and the roles of the townships and so forth versus what you're proposing that aren't going to get answered in 20 minutes. I think we're probably already over 20 minutes. So here's where I am, cutting to the chase. I would like to discuss this more and get more information. I'm not ready to advance your specific proposal at this time to have a new position created as an elected trustee. But if it's within the discretion of the rules and the chair, if your motion was to advance this concept for further discussion and an exploration of different possible solutions, I would be in favor of that, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
The rules we've established are that we can advance it for further future discussion, if there are 9 votes for the proposal as made. So if it's the will of the body that we look into this more deeply, then it would require 9 votes.
So just so I'm clear, it's the specific proposal, not the concept, that we would have to advance?
Well, we've talked earlier about trying to keep this a little bit broader, but at some point we have to narrow this down to a specific proposal. It is not the job of this commission to draft that for somebody, but we can get Randy some help to see. And I also think I think there are some serious legal questions about statutorily whether we can do this that would have to be answered. Because if we're founded on one person, one vote, we simply can't give one area of the county the ability to negotiate budgets with 10% of the population outside of the Board of County Commissioners. So I think there's some legal issues with this too, but I really would rather not continue something on the first reading to the next, to a future meeting. If we think we want to discuss it seriously, let's see if there are 9 votes, and then we will automatically discuss it at a future meeting. Karen hasn't had a chance yet, and then we'll go to Dawn, and then Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate the work that Randy has done to present the problem. And I think what needs to be done is to pursue the right solution, whether that's the county addressing this in their budget hearing time or whatever. And certainly I know, being on Olathe City Council, we've benefited from SPAC dollars and CARS funding and so on and so forth. But certainly there has to come a time where your part of the county is addressed and your needs are addressed. And I don't know what the right formula is to put that forward. So I want us to be careful, Mr. Chair, that we don't have such a tight box. We can't forward a legitimate need that needs to be addressed, if that makes sense.
And I would agree with that, but I want to make sure it's clear that what our duty is to either adopt an amendment to the charter, which if adopted by the voters would fix it in the charter for at least 10 years, or to propose recommendations for problems or issues that we see. And I'm not sure where this one falls myself. We have, who did I have next? Mayor Boehm, and then we have Zoom.
Thanks, Greg. Mike Boehm. Randy, empathize with your situation. Our farm is at K7 and K10. You can't go anywhere without getting on the highway or loading things up and hauling them around. So I understand. I don't think we can solve this in this commission meeting with a charter amendment. My position is this is a great recommendation that should be studied by the county and looked at. But I don't see an amendment. I have constitutional concerns. I don't know what a trustee is and how it weighs with a commissioner. If we want to have an equal footing, then we have one man, one vote, equal representation. I don't know what the unincorporated population is, but we would then have to carve the rest of the county up in equal segments and change that populations changed to make sure we, adhered to that constitutional concept. So I don't know that we can move this forward as a amendment, because I don't think we don't know where that goes, to be honest with you. You talked about population, you talked about land mass. I appreciate that. What you didn't talk about is dollars raised from the tax venues. If we look at the numbers in the tax venues, the numbers coming out of the unincorporated areas are minuscule compared to the rest of the county. I think we have an obligation to take care of all the county, but where are the dollars coming from? So my thought is what's a better solution to this is the unincorporated areas create a liaison that you all monitor the county actions are happening. You need to have your voices heard at commission meetings when these types of things are coming forward. Probably more effective then to rally the troops and the audience than it is to have an elected position at this point. We don't know what its capabilities are or what its weight is in conversations. So I don't see an amendment here, but I appreciate the concern, the position.
Thank you. That comment's been made before, where would your funding come from? And I want to put this back to the city mayors, right? When the intermodal came in, what happened? When a warehouse gets built, what happens? You guys annex them in. You take all the revenue. So how could we have any revenue? I mean, if we want to go back 5 years, maybe that's what we ought to do. Go back 5 years and all the tax revenue that comes in from all the land that was annexed in the last 5 years could be redirected into the unincorporated area. Perhaps that's a formula that we use. I don't know. But for somebody to say, well, you have no tax dollars, of course you don't have any tax dollars because it keeps getting annexed. Look how fast Edgerton's grown. All right, that was all unincorporated area. As you know, the city of Olathe is expanding, Overland Park's expanding, everybody's expanding and they're taking those revenue dollars. So I appreciate what you're saying. Here's my thought. So I would hate to shut it down because of what we don't know today. All right, as Chairman stated, perhaps it isn't allowed by state law. I don't know. All right, but it would be a shame that if we didn't advance it, so where we could do the research, we could talk to the district attorney's office and attorney general, et cetera, to figure out what we can and can't do. I don't know what the rights of the home charter give Johnson County, right? I don't know what limitations we have, but I can tell you that this is obviously being done in other places.
Ms. Rattan?
Yeah. Can I use your microphone? So you are proposing one person to represent 7 townships. But at the bottom, you mentioned a new organization structure. So just wanted to get clarification on, again, the proposal for one person or a new organization to represent these 7 townships. Someone else has already mentioned the impact on established processes that are already done with the city council, the commissioners, the planning and development and the zoning commissions that would need to be addressed. And then the final question I have for you is you mentioned the Johnson County District Attorney working this transition. And why did you propose that as opposed to the county commissioners working the transition? Because it seems like that would be their primary point of contact.
Randy, if you could keep it short. If you could keep it shorter, we got 2 questions on the Zoom and we were about 35 or 40 minutes into our 20 minutes. So I'm doing a great job so far.
Okay, thank you for the questions, Don. I don't know how many townships are involved. If you look at if you go back to the map, what you see is it's only in 2 districts. So it's, 2 of the 6 districts. I don't know how many townships that actually touches. So I'm not sure I can answer that question. But it is only 40%. The reason for, I was trying to logically think through how would you do this transformation, right? And so I went back to my days at Sprint and Ericsson. So when we moved, we took 6,000 people from Sprint that managed the network and we moved them over to Ericsson. What did we do? We set up a transformation office. The transformation office was a neutral third party. It was comprised of people from Sprint. It's comprised from people of Ericsson. They agreed to budgets. They agreed to headcount. They agreed to timelines. They agreed to leaders. Basically, their goal was to make sure there was a seamless transition of those operations. And that's what I envisioned here is we don't want to fall down, right? And, and stub our toe during this transition. And the other thing I thought about, okay, well, who could facilitate that third party? Who could you trust to say, hey, time out, be that referee? Listen, they're going to need somebody from IT, like they're saying, to be successful, or they're going to need somebody from HR. So let's make sure we carve out the right people to, to set them up for success and not failure. Who could do that? And that's where I'm like, it's a voted position, right? Who best can play the referee in the county? And that's where it naturally occurred to me that it'd be the district attorney's office. And that's where I reached out to Steve Howe and Steve made it clear, I'm not for or against this idea, but what I'm saying is I'm willing to play team if you all.
I'm going to ask the 3 people on Zoom to make their comments as quickly as possible. And then I'm going to ask for a motion and a vote to see whether we advance this. We
have Leslie Riviola on Zoom.
Thank you. Leslie Riverola here. I'll try to make this very quick. I, again, appreciate the passion and all of the discussion on this topic. I will not be able to support this as it is presented or in any manner. One, I don't think that establishing another office using government tax dollars and growing government is consistent with what we've heard from people who have appeared and spoken at these county commission or the charter commission meetings. Second, I think creating an additional elected office, if that were going to be a proposal, should have been a standalone one to create a 7th county commission seat and then allow an appropriate redistricting to occur. This to me looks like a way to circumvent that process and establish an elected position for a very small percentage of our population. And that's all of my comments. Thank you for the opportunity.
Now we have Don Roberts.
So I'll make mine really brief. I actually, I do believe that Mr. Hutchinson is right in the fact that the county doesn't invest back into that infrastructure in the county area, like I think they could. I do want to make a point when Randy was talking about cities annexing and the revenue going away, the county still receives tax dollars off of the city portion of the county. But I would like to, I don't think this is a charter amendment for me, but I do like the concept of having a conversation where the county could have more focus in the rural areas.
Thank you. Now we have Chris Iliff.
Yeah. Hey, first of all, Randy, great presentation. Really highlighting what I think there is a real problem. I don't think I could support another elected official, but I do think that we need to get the two elected officials who do represent parts of the unincorporated area to come together and be a little more forceful. I will tell you this, $1 million per mile for chip and seal is absurd. And as much as I really, really appreciate Brian Pedig and our roads and bridges people, that amount just doesn't make any sense at all. I live on a private road that's chip and sealed. I know exactly what it costs to do that. And so I think the problem is real. You've really pointed out in a very effective way. I just don't think that the solution is one that this Charter Commission is capable of working on. But thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
And I'll remind everybody that amendments that don't get 9 votes to move to second reading, we can always consider as a recommendation once we get through all the amendments. So, Randy, I assume you will make a motion to establish a Johnson County Unincorporated trustee. We'll see if we get a second and we'll vote.
Thank you, Chairman Island. That's correct. I make that motion.
Seconded by Laura Klingensmith.
Can I ask a point of order, Chair?
You may.
Since he moved to create the position of trustee, will that limit our discussion at the next level if it passes to yay or nay on that specific idea?
I don't think so. I don't see that as limiting. I think that there has to be a lot of flesh put on this skeleton before we would vote on it at second reading, and there's got to be some more research about whether or not it can even be done. So again, this is far more conceptual than our first vote.
Thank you.
Yes.
Wendy Bingesser. That's a yes. Mike Bain?
Bain, no.
No. Karen Brownlee?
Brownlee, yes.
Yes. Vicki Charlesworth?
No. Vicki Charlesworth, no.
No. Jim Denning?
Jim Denning votes yes.
That's a yes. Jane Dirks? That's a yes. Jimmy Gaona? That's a no. Tedrick Hausch? That's a no. Randy Hutchins?
Yes.
That's a yes. Chris Iliff? Chris Iliff?
No.
That's a no. Laura Klingensmith?
Laura Klinging-Smith, yes.
That's a yes. Joy Costin?
Joy Costin, no.
That's a no. Brent McCune? Brent McCune? Brent, you need to unmute. I'll come back to that.
Yes, Brent McCune is no.
Okay, thank you. That's a no. Eric Michelson?
Eric Michelson, yes.
That's a yes. Ed Peterson?
Ed Peterson, no.
That's a no. Don Rattan? That's a no. Leslie Riverola?
Leslie Riverola is a no.
That's a no. Don Roberts?
Don Roberts, no.
That's a no. Kyle Russell?
Kyle Russell, no.
That's no. Paula Swack?
No.
That's no. Brenda Sharp?
Brenda Sharp, no.
That's a no. Greg Shelton?
Greg Shelton, no.
That's a no. Greg Smith?
Yes.
That's a yes. Zach Thomas?
Zach Thomas, yes.
That's a yes. Chair Musel?
Chair would vote no.
That's a no.
I have 16 no, but 9 yes.
That's what I have, a 9.
All right. We will forward that to second reading and have some work to do between now and then. Thank you, Randy. Randy, the next one was a change in the county appraiser's office. Would you like to hold that as a recommendation We statutorily, we cannot do that. The statute says it has to be appointed. We would have to change the statute, and we can't do that by this commission. So, okay, well, I don't want to spend discussion time now if we can on an amendment that I don't think we have the authority to do, as opposed to doing it as a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners later.
I guess what I'd like to do is, before we kill something, we're talking about another 10 years, before we have another opportunity to do this, I think it's worthwhile that we have this discussion.
Okay. I will, can you get this done in 5 minutes?
Yeah, I think this is pretty straightforward.
Excuse me. The item is change the head of the Johnson County Appraisal Office to an elected position.
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. I mean, obviously, there's multiple states that actually have this as an elected position. I believe there's a conflict of interest when you have the individual reporting, from a human resource perspective to the chairman, which is responsible for bringing revenue to offset the expenses. But at the same time, we don't have any means to litigate any issues with the appraisers through the county commissioners. They're told hands off. So with that, they fall back to the state, and the state statute where you cannot touch, you cannot discuss or impede any of the evaluations. Again, I think, quite frankly, we need to get some outside counsel. I know I've reached out to the Attorney General's office, and we're waiting for a response back from them. So I know they're looking at it. So I think it warrants, talking about this, whether or not we're for or against it. I mean, quite clearly, the citizens have spoke. They feel like they want an elected position. I know I come from an environment in Ohio where it's elected position. And I will give you a brief example of what my experience is there. I recently purchased my parents' farm to keep the farm within the family. And 2 months after doing so, I get a phone call from the appraiser's office. And as you all would imagine, the hair stands up on the back of your neck when you get a call from the appraiser's office. And I said, yeah, how can I help you? And they said, this is Andrew from Union County and the appraiser's office. And I wanted to let you know that if I send you this form and you fill it out, you will realize a reduction in your taxes. I'm like, who's this? It was the elected appraiser. The elected appraiser reached out to me and said, if you sign this form, we're going to reduce your taxes. Now, has anybody had that experience in Johnson County? My experience has been quite the opposite in Johnson County. So from that, it only makes sense that that individual is accountable to the people and they don't do a fair job, then they're not going to be elected again. So I think that's pretty straightforward.
I think this is one of those black and white areas where the statute is clear, but I don't intend to shut down discussion or debate about it. It is proposed as an amendment to the charter that if we propose and put on the ballot, I believe would violate statute and couldn't be done. So I guess I'm looking to the board, and we can have it, or commission, we can have a vote if we want to about whether to proceed with this as an amendment. I have various reasons why I don't believe it would be a good thing to do, even if we could do it. But Greg Smith.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have no problem with this as a recommendation, but KSA 19-101A defines what charter counties can and cannot do. And it specifically says that they cannot change anything that's governed by KSA 19-430, which is county appraiser. In that very first sentence, it says county appraisers are appointed. So I have no problem moving this forward as a recommendation at the appropriate time, but I can't support it as an amendment because it's not legal.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I think the question that came up is if it's something that we want to retain, is there an appetite for, the legislators that are in the room and beyond to look at this in their next session to make changes at the state level? I guess that's one of the questions that I had. My biggest concern is, are we going to have to wait 10 more years? And then we have the exact same discussion. Well, at the state level, it's a state statute. And Mr. Smith, I read the exact same thing. And I noted that as well. But I wasn't sure what is the process of which we drive that conversation at the state level. And that's why I kind of wanted to put on the table for you all to consider.
I think the appropriate place to do that would be through a recommendation to the board. And if a recommendation received 13 votes, then we could send that to the Board of County Commissioners. But do you want to have a vote on whether or not?
Chair, we have one speaker that from Zoom.
Okay, please.
Zach Thomas.
Chairman, I was going to echo what Mr. Smith and yourself have said. I was going to see, given the illegality of it, just if it had to be Mr. Hutchins that called for a previous question, or if I could go ahead and call for a vote on this in the effort of time, and then we address it as a recommendation following our first reading of all the amendments.
It hasn't been moved. We don't have a motion and a second yet, so I'm trying to figure out, Randy, do you want a motion and a second and a vote as an amendment? Or would you rather wait and hold it and turn it into a recommendation?
Well, I think based on what the feedback is here today, I think it's saying it's like the best opportunity to move us forward would be more with the recommendation than it would be in that. That way we have an opportunity to make change in parallel.
I would agree with that. I don't. So is that what your
Yes.
wish? Okay. So we won't have a motion on that particular item. We are speeding along. I hope the police aren't out with radar. This next item is create a public health and safety governing board. There are really two that are related, one by Commissioner Coaston, one by Commissioner Peterson. The second one is the Health Advisory Council. Would you read the first one, Linda?
Create a public health and safety governing board to provide oversight for the public health department and county sheriff's department.
And before you go, Joy, I think by statute, the Board of County Commissioners is the Board of Public Health. So I think my first question would be, could you explain to us how this oversight board, what do you mean by oversight? Is it advisory, similar to what Commissioner Peterson has talked about?
Yeah.
And we could maybe address those together as opposed to a board that would be decision-making, which again, I think violates Kansas statute.
Yes, thank you
Mr.
for that
Chairman,
clarification.
We visited briefly here a moment ago, and if it would be acceptable to the commission, we would like to take this up at the next meeting and give us a chance to try to combine these into just one proposal.
I have no objection to that. Is anybody else? We're not going to get through all the proposed amendments tonight, so that would knock us 2 down to 1. The next item is governing boards and a proposal by Commissioner Smith to have the directors and members of governing boards, various boards appointed by the Board of County Commissioners. You go ahead and read that, Linda.
Under governing boards, the directors and members of the governing boards of Johnson County Library System, Parks and Recreation District, Mental Health Center, Developmental Supports, and the Airport Commission shall be appointed by the Board of County Commissioners based on education and experience for the position appointed to. All appointees shall maintain residence within Johnson County and be a qualified elector.
Commissioner Smith?
Mr. Chairman, this is pretty short and sweet. I think that county government is local government, which is supposedly the government closest to the people. And people that don't live in Johnson County would not necessarily have Johnson County's best interest at heart. Perfect example of that, Dr. Lemaster is not a resident of Johnson County, yet he can issue edicts that control people's behavior. He lives in Wyandotte County.
Let me ask you this, Greg, then. My understanding is at least the library board and the Parks and Rec board were created by statute, voted on by Johnson County citizens to create those boards, and that those boards have the appointed powers for their own directors, and that the members are also set forth by that vote. So there seems like there are two separate things here. One is how are the directors appointed, how are the members appointed, maybe three, and then residency. Are those, am I reading this right?
Well, basically, I mean, I know statutorily, like the airport commission and that, there are things that we can't touch and can't change. But as far as appointments that are made to those positions by the BOCC, those people that hold those positions, once they hold those positions, need to live in the county and be a registered voter in the county.
Okay. So your position is that, for instance, if the Board of County Commissioners appoints members to the Parks and Rec Board, as they do under the statute and as approved by voters, they would have to be residents of Johnson County in order to be appointed.
Correct.
And if they are the director, like the director of the library is appointed by the library board. So we can't undo that by charter amendment.
Right. No, I'm not
Okay.
trying to change any statute here. It's simply what we can do within the charter.
Okay, so it's really members of those boards. The directors of those entities are appointed by the boards. You're more interested in the board members themselves.
Yeah, yes, that's true. But those boards where the director can be appointed that aren't necessarily controlled by statute, I would also like included.
Okay.
Question.
Mr. Russell and then Ms. Sharp.
Is it not, I don't know the answer to this, but is it not already a requirement that the appointees to the governing boards be residents? Is that not already a requirement?
Ms. Dunham.
Cindy Dunham, legal. The various statutes provide certain requirements. The Airport Commission, residents who are not elected officials or employees, Park and Rec, qualified electors of the district and reside in the district at the time of appointment and during terms of office. Library, they must be residents of the county. And JCDS is talks about various members representative of listed groups in that statute.
So Greg, your proposal would be anybody that is not already governed by something that requires them to be a resident of Johnson County
Correct.
would be now required to be a resident of Johnson County.
Correct.
Okay. And we could flesh that, who those actually are, out by the second reading.
Right.
Questions or comments? Okay. Couple on Zoom.
Leslie Riviola.
Yes, thank you, Leslie Riverola. A couple of clarifying points, and I think maybe we're getting there, but Johnson County Park and Recreation District is created by statute. Those positions, just like I am an appointed member of the Johnson County Park and Recreation District, we are required to be qualified electors of Johnson County. We're required to maintain residency throughout the entirety of that. And that is an autonomous board for the purpose of taxing. And I don't think it appropriate, nor would I support anything that would undermine the authority of that board to appoint its own executive director, which is allowed for in the statute.
As I hear it, you're not asking for that.
Yeah, I'm not asking for that.
One more.
Somebody bailed out up there.
Somebody what?
Somebody bailed out. Somebody else had their hand up.
Oh,
They're
okay.
There now.
All right.
I have a question if I
Yes,
may.
Mayor Bain.
One, I'd like to see a grid to know what all offices that this is impacting. Do we have
I'm not
a,
picking you up, Mike, so whatever you're asking me, I can't hear you.
can you hear me?
I've got hearing aids.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but
Okay. I would like, I'm not opposed to this necessarily. One, do we have a residency requirement for the department heads in the county? Are we going to have a higher standard for members of essentially voluntary boards than we do for department heads? So I'd like clarification on that. And then two, it lists library and it lists parse. I'm hearing we can't change those anyway. So between now and next meeting, or at some point before we vote on an amendment, I'd like to have a grid that shows me what all positions are is this affecting that we can affect, not those that are not.
I agree. We would need to know, if we advance this, we'll need to know by the next time who this really affects, who's not already covered by statute or by the charter of their organization with respect to membership. Ms. Costin.
Thank you. So Commissioner Smith, would you clarify a little bit more? Are these appointments already done by the Board of Commissioners? Is it just a residency issue that you're trying to change? And
Yes,
okay, and
it's a residency issue and a qualified elector issue,
okay, and so
which
where?
Dr. Lemaster is neither.
Well, and so where in any of these departments does he fall?
For all I know, every single one of them.
Is he's with the county library system?
I don't know. Do you know?
He's a public health official. He's a public health official, but I'm just trying to clarify. I mean, the way this is written.
The point is to make it that way if it's not, as we can within statute. That's the only object here.
So it's just about residency. And it seems to be, do we know if any of these other board members are currently not residents? I think we already had some issues where they don't have to be. I mean, this is Kansas. I'm a little confused by
I want to clarify, Greg, too, that so there are two separate things here. There are volunteer citizen boards that are appointed by the county. Parks and Rec, Library, Airport Committee. You want all of those to be county residents? It sounds like they probably already have to be.
Yeah, and if that's the case, that's fine. Then we don't need to worry about that.
But then there are county paid employee positions, such as Dr. Lemaster, that you want also to be subject to a residency requirement.
Correct.
And how far then do you believe that should reach down into the organization? Is it every county employee? Are you looking at?
I'm not suggesting every county employee, only those that have authority to do things like issue an edict that covers the entire county and doesn't live here.
So we need some definition to that. If we got
and we
the
can
second
flesh
reading.
that out before second reading.
Mr. Gowna? Somebody hand him a box.
Oh,
Jimmy Gowna here. Mr. Smith, I was curious if you have any data for other counties, i.e. Wyandotte County, that has a hard must live in county policy for, I believe, all their employees. But do you have any data from any other counties that says one way or the other if it improves?
No, I don't. It has nothing to do with the efficiency of the county. It has to do with what's right for the county.
Can you help me define between right and efficiency?
I've had several people contact me that want this amendment brought forward.
Thank you.
We're running out of electricity. Mayor Michelson?
Just a point of clarification. I'm reading the text of the proposed amendment and it says the directors and members of the governing boards. But I thought I heard you say then verbally that you're not intending to pick up the directors. Could you just?
I'm not trying to change any statute at all. So whatever's in statute now can stay, and that's fine. But all of these other appointed positions, if they aren't covered under the charter, aren't covered under statute, need to be residents of Johnson County.
Including directors of the governing boards?
If that's allowed by statute. If it's not, then it's not.
I understand. Thank you.
Mr. Hash? You have a box?
Thank you. If from this discussion, Dr. Lemaster is the principal concern, I mean, the one that brought this to
That's
people's.
one example.
How is Dr. Lemaster appointed? And I would just like to know more about that. If that were the only issue and we could address that person and not guess at who the others were, that would help me zone in on what we're
And that's
talking
fine.
about.
Staff may be able to address that.
Okay. I mean, for me, that's the
question. Ms. Dunham.
Thank you. Cindy Dunham, legal. Dr. Lemaster is appointed pursuant to statute KSA 25-201 by the Board of County Commissioners. He's required the appointment of the local health officer has to be licensed to practice medicine in the state of Kansas. There's some other exceptions to that. And so that is something that's pursuant to statute. And recently in some of the public health legislation that was passed, Section 39 of KSA 19101A that was recently referenced that sets forth the home rule powers of counties and the limitations did include and add to it that KSA 65-201. So there'd be an issue there we would have to look at too.
So what I'm hearing then is that statute covers all of this? Is that a correct assessment?
At this point, I would say so because of the as it pertains to Dr. Lemaster.
Okay. In that case, I'll withdraw for now. Just withdraw the amendment.
Okay. Okay, so there will be no motion then on the governing board item. You had somebody else on Zoom? I'm sorry.
We did have Vicki Charlesworth. Would you still like to make a comment, Vicki?
The only thing I would say is from a human resources recruiting standpoint, if you require that the person live in the county at the time of appointment, I think you're limiting your pool. And maybe you have some type of provision if you do move forward with this, that they give so much time to move into the county. Just, those are my comments.
I'm guessing that that would have been acceptable to Greg if he'd pursued this. If you move into the county within 90 days or whatever, you'd be okay, but okay. The next item on here is all vacancies of the county Board of County Commissioners filled by special election. You want to read that, Linda, and then I'll be back to Commissioner Smith.
Board of County Commissioners section. All vacancies on the Board of County Commissioners should be filled by special election unless the next scheduled election is within 90 days of the position becoming vacant.
Chairman Musil, this is simply, again, another way for the people of Johnson County to weigh in on this issue. It doesn't happen very often, may have never happened in the history of the county for all I know. But having the governing body appoint somebody to fill a position is just a way to perpetuate policy that may or may not be what residents of the county want. So a special election lets the people weigh in. Since we have nonpartisan elections, if it was a partisan election, it would have been done by precinct people, but we don't have that option. So this is the only option to do that. And basically all it does is instead of having BOCC appoint a replacement where within 90 days of an election, then it'll just go to the election. If not, we hold a special election for that replacement.
And that was the point I was going to make, that we kind of bunched the partisan decisions that we're going to make later in the amendment process. But this assumes a nonpartisan election of Board of County Commissioners. Otherwise, it would not be necessary. I have tried to educate myself. There's a complicated resolution that the county commission adopted after the original charter that establishes how vacancies are accomplished. They are accomplished by an appointment of the Board of County Commissioners. If they're a certain period of time before the midterm election, so your 4-year terms, if there's a vacancy in the first year and it's filled, they will stand for election to the final 2 years of that term. At the next regular county election, then they would stand for their 4-year term. So this would really address having those elections more frequently if they're like in year 1 or year 3, basically, of a 4-year term. Is that kind of that way? And again, this is one I think we'd need to flesh out some more, because if it's 91 days, I mean, the amount of time, if it's the 91st day before when somebody resigns, you're not going to have a special election, but those timeframes get screwy when you think of all the hypotheticals. So discussion on this one, Mayor Schwach. Oh, you need a box, please. I'm sorry. By box, for those of you on Zoom and observers, I'm talking about the microphones.
I would find it difficult to support for this reason. Special elections are costly. And if the current process allows the person to be elected permanently at the next general election, I see no reason to incur that cost.
On Zoom,
I have Zach Thomas.
I'll echo the mayor's sentiments, Mr. Smith. While I agree with your earlier one that you withdrew, I have problems okaying a special election that could cost the county taxpayers who knows how much money, especially given the lack of probability or the minimal amount of time that this could be applicable. So
I did ask about this. It's happened once since the charter, and that was when I think David Lindstrom was selected to fill the position. I don't know who vacated the position, but I think it's been once in 20 years. So,
Yeah, that was
Commissioner. Oh,
Ed Peterson. I do have a question, Greg, but that occurred when Annabeth Serbaugh ascended to the chair and left her district seat open. And I think that's the only time it's been used. And the problems with that were what generated the resolution that we have in place now for replacement. Better? I do have a question, Greg. When you say special election, I mean, are you talking about an election just for that purpose, or would it be tied with the next upcoming election?
I mean, I'm open to discussion on that and some change to that if that's necessary.
because we now have November elections every year. So there is a regular election of some form every 2 years. I'm sorry, every year. So it might be that you could combine those with that. Although not every city has it and not everybody has something to vote for in those, so. Okay. Commissioner Rattan and then Commissioner Sharp.
I'm sorry. I think I cut in line. For the mayors that are here, what is your process for your special appointments and elections when this happens in your cities? And should we line up with that?
For Lenexa, we appoint to the remainder of the term with mayor appointee council approval. We had one that went 4 years. We had a candidate win the election, pass away on Sunday. Actually, she passed away on Sunday. The election was on Tuesday. She still won. And I appointed that position for the 4 years.
And in my city, elections are only for every 2 years, so I would appoint to fill the vacancy.
Prairie Village does this same way, Lynette.
Don Roberts, how does Edgerton do it?
Edgerton does it just like Lenexa. So mayor appoints, council confirms.
I like to think of it as Lenexa following Edgerton's process, but okay. Is that all the mayors? I don't want to, if I leave somebody out, I'm going to get in trouble. Okay. Other comments on this concept that would allow or require an election to fill a vacancy more quickly than every 2 years, I guess is highly summarized.
I would just say it's worked well for Lenexa. All but one of the appointees I've made in my 20 years have been reelected at the next election. And it's very expensive, even it's only one commission district, but it's still putting dollars out there that will correct itself within a 2 year cycle. Well, could be a 4 year, but within a cycle.
It could be a 4 year cycle in Lenexa. It could be a 2 year cycle in the county under the current resolution. Commissioner Brownlee?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not a mayor, but I'm on the city council in Olathe when we had a vacancy about a year ago.
We can't hear.
Oh, no.
Thank you.
This is.
Olathe is a little different. A subcommittee brings forward a recommendation and then the council approves. But I think the difference here is that we're talking about just rough math, roughly 100,000 people. And so it is a number of people to represent. And so that's where an election whether it's the next regular election or whatever, is a reasonable consideration.
I want clarification on current practice. I know there was a resolution adopted, but is it till the next county election or is it till until the term's up?
It's till the next county election. So
Okay.
if
So-
you're
so it's
in
2
year
years
one,
maximum.
it's a 2-year maximum. Well, if it's late in the second year and it's too close to the second midterm election, you could go 2.5 years because there's not time to be on the ballot for the fall election in year 2, if that makes sense. So a maximum would be about 2.5 years, I think. Greg, would you like to make that as a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll move my motion.
Do we have a second? Second by Wendy Benzinger, or Bezinger, or Shees. All right, we'll call roll. A yes vote would be to forward this to second reading, to consider requiring an election, I won't call it a special election, for a vacancy on the county commission earlier than every 2 years in the county's regular election cycle.
Wendy Bingesser. That's a yes. Mike Boehm. That's a no. Karen Brownlee.
Brownlee, yes.
That's a yes. Vicky Charlesworth.
No.
That's a no. Jim Denny. That's a yes. Jane Dirks. That's a yes. Jimmy Gaona. It's a yes. Tedrick House.
Tedrick House, no.
That's a no. Randy Hutchins.
Randy Hutchins, yes.
That's a yes. Chris Iliff. Chris Iliff, can you unmute yourself? We'll come back to him. He's on his phone now. If you could unmute, Chris. Laura Klingon-Smith.
Laura Klingon-Smith, yes.
That's a yes. Joy Costin.
Joy Coasted, no.
That's a no. Brent McCune.
McCune, no.
It's a no. Eric Michelson.
Michelson, no.
That's a no. Ed Peterson.
Ed Peterson, no.
That's a no. Don Rattan.
Don Rattan, no.
That's a no. Leslie Riviola.
Leslie Riverola, yes.
It's a yes. Don Roberts.
Don Roberts, yes.
It's a yes. Kyle Russell.
Kyle Russell, no.
That's a no. Paula Swak.
No.
It's a no. Brenda Sharp.
Brenda Sharp, no.
That's a no. Greg Shelton.
Greg Shelton, no.
That's a no. Greg Smith.
Yes.
That's a yes. Zach Thomas.
No.
That's a no. Greg Musel.
Chair votes no.
That's a no. And Chris Iliff, are you able to unmute?
I have 10 yes votes without Chris.
That's what I have, Chair.
So that would move on to second reading. And again, on that, maybe Greg, we can sit down and figure out some more parameters on it so it's a little clearer.
Yep.
There's the details on that one.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question on the previous one submitted by Greg Smith. When it was commented that state statute addresses the appointment of the public health officer, I've read these statutes and I don't believe they address the issue of residency. So just because it's the appointment is in state statute, if residency is not addressed, would that not still be something that could be considered by this group?
I think that's a fair question. The statute says they are appointed. It doesn't say they have to be residents. It doesn't say you can't impose a residency requirement. So I think we should look at that and Greg, give you another opportunity if we find out about that to revisit that issue. I'm going to remind everybody, this is good discussion. It's really the first time we've started talking about the meat of why we're here. But I really want to get through all these in our November and December meetings. So that gives us 3 more meetings. And we set up the rules so that we would vote on first reading, the next meeting go to second reading, and then the next meeting vote on the actual amendment. So we're going to have to move quickly, and we may have to expand our meeting times at some point if we're going to get this done. We can go into January, but our deadline is February 22nd, I think, and we need to write a report. So Commissioner Sharp.
Mr. Chair, can you qualify a process question for us in terms of how long people have to resubmit these amendments or rework them so that we know exactly what we're voting on at
Right.
the meeting and we have time to review that in advance?
I suspect, I think if everybody who has a proposal that we've talked about tonight, it's going to be resubmitted or that move to second reading can be more clear on those before the next meeting, November 17th, that'd be great. Although frankly, looking at what's left on the schedule and the amount of time I suspect we might use on partisan elections, we may not get to the second reading until that first meeting in December, but I think we should shoot for everybody attempting to get something more specific by the next meeting.
I guess I just want to know at what point do we essentially call the question and say the amendment is what the amendment is and you vote up and down, or do we keep wordsmithing that piece?
We're not going to vote at the second reading. We're going to have a second reading and we're not going to vote till the next amendment or the next meeting. So if you're bringing an amendment and you've reached second reading, you need to be specific enough so that we can work on it. I think if you want to work with Ms. Dunham on language, I'm trying not to dump stuff on Cindy, but to implement your concept, do that before the second reading so that when we get to the vote on the second reading, we know exactly what we're voting on. I don't think we should vote if we don't have that specificity. I will not support an amendment just because I'm not going to put something out there that is unclear. So that's my personal position.
Chair,
Yes.
we've had a couple questions, or I have received, I want to make a clarification on the first item of the elected positions of city clerk, register of deeds, and I think it was treasurer. That had a vote of 8 to 17, so it did not pass to move forward. Then I personally have a question, and the question also has come up, is the item about the governing boards of the library that Greg Smith had, Parks and Rec. Was that just moved to be discussed at another meeting since we did not do a vote?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it was withdrawn at this point, but I think given the questions about what is statutory and what's not, that it would be fair to allow that to be revisited at another meeting.
Okay, so it would be withdrawn.
It will.
Okay.
But Commissioner Sharp's question is the good one, which is we got to cut this off at some point. So if you have proposed an amendment that wasn't reached tonight, please revisit it. If you need to resubmit it with more detail or specifics, do that. This is our first effort to try to figure this out. And so it's going to be a little bit of making sausage, but let's at least make Jimmy Dean sausage next time. Joy.
I apologize, Chairman Musil, but you lost me on that last one. So if an amendment failed tonight, can they go back and read?
If an amendment failed, it failed.
It failed.
If it was withdrawn or it's going to be turned into a recommendation, which I think is what Randy does. On the boards, we're going to let Greg Smith reintroduce that with information about who it would affect.
Okay, so in theory, we should be whittling down the number of amendments or recommendations that we will address in the last 2 meetings.
Correct.
Perfect.
Mr. Peterson?
Chairman, you might say a word about our intentions with the cleanup type of amendments.
Oh, that's right. I think Mayor Swak submitted some cleanup amendments. What the executive committee has proposed is that let's see if there are any amendments that pass to get on the ballot. If not, or whether there are or not, we can then decide whether it's worth putting just a cleanup amendment Or if we have other amendments on there, then maybe we add some cleanup amendments. But those were truly cleanup. Some of yours had substantive provisions within them, but if it's just a cleanup amendment to get rid of something that was applicable in 2000 and is not applicable now, we were going to address those at the end. Thank you, Ed.
Seems completely rational to me that you would take that approach. You wouldn't want to bear the cost
Right.
unless there's also something substantive.
Well, I'd like to note that's the first time the executive committee has ever been accused of doing something rational. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Mr. Guyana and seconded by Ms. Rattan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Our next meeting is November 17th at KU Edwards campus. Thank you all for your time. We are adjourned. Yep. No. We here?
We are here for the next meeting in the same location, the admin building at 4:00 in Olathe, Kansas, in the same room, 200. Thank you.
So much for rational. I blew it.
Can I make another request that if people have presentations that require AV, that they drive in advance to set up just to keep our
Yes,
time?
if you're going to make
I
an
know
audio
there's always
visual.
problems and nothing against Randy. I just want to, there's always something that goes wrong with that.
We'll send a reminder out on that too.